Good evening, friends. Yampy, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Brian and Randy, thanks for your love and support. This story is dedicated to everyone who has struggled with mental health issues, and to all seekers and non-seekers. May our science and compassion broaden to include understanding of the mind, and when learning about the myriad of ways that people suffer, may our hearts open faster than our minds. For those of you who may not know what ayahuasca is, it's an Amazonian tea made from 2 indigenous plants that has traditionally been consumed only by the village's doctors for diagnosis of physical, mental, and emotional illness. This traditional medicine has become accessible to Westerners in the past 20 years, however, and when drinking this tea is done in a safe and ceremonial setting, the plants demonstrate a broad therapeutic potential, especially for the treatment of substance dependence, anxiety, and depression. A little bit about me. By nature, I am an independent and persevering soul. But the story I'm about to describe, which took place in June of 2022 through the present, cost me my mind and nearly my life. It is with a good degree of comfort and peace that I tell this story today, but that peace has been hard-earned. But in addition to the struggles I've overcome in the past year and 9 months, I have also been immensely blessed. How have I been blessed? I have been blessed with mediumship. And my kind of mediumship is the kind that is connected to the voice of spirit. It has been this relationship that has brought me many gifts, the least of which are the healing wisdom and insight. But before my story is over, I'd like to share with you all of some of the wisdom that Spirit has shared with me. I feel this wisdom is very powerful and believe that it's not mine to hold. I was a sensitive child, ever curious about the big questions of existence. I've always been drawn to that liminal space between life and death. I am sure that my father, who was my person, and died suddenly in a car accident on my 6th birthday, amplified my interest in what happens when we die. By 12, I was devouring books on near-death experiences. And at 16, I entered college early to become a firefighter so that I could hold the hands of the dying and be a calm presence in their final breaths. No one should die alone, and no matter how evolved we are, we all need permission to go. After serving 10 years active duty in the U.S. Navy, at age 27, I married my ex-husband, and we built a very stable life together and raised my stepdaughter. In those years, I identified as an atheist, but always felt that things were connected in a way that I couldn't explain. As an extension of my curiosity of the transcendent, in my early 40s, I became cautiously interested in the therapeutic use of psychedelics and found that Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, made the idea of using psychedelics more approachable. So after 2 years of intensely learning about them, in 2020, I began experimenting with high doses of psilocybin mushrooms. And in 2022, after feeling drawn to ayahuasca, I went down to Costa Rica to sit with this medicine with 20 people from around the world through a company called Solterra, which had a reputable reputation for running an ayahuasca retreat center in Costa Rica and Peru. My intention for going down to Costa Rica was simple. I wanted to repair the fractured relationship with my mom. What ended up happening that week in Costa Rica was beyond incredible and challenges all conceptual ideas of reality. If you're interested in hearing that expanded story, you can find my interview on the Mindful Empath podcast, published in January 1st of this year. But to give you a taste of what happened that week, I found myself having very natural telepathic conversations with the Shipibo doctors, or what we call shamans, while in ceremony. What your mom did was not okay, Maestra Olga saying in the only language that she spoke, which is Quechua. Yet I heard it in English through my mind. Your thyroid gland will be healed. Your thyroid gland will be healed, she sang. Then she showed me a scene from my childhood when I was 11 years old, but she did this again through her mind. And in that moment, it felt so natural to communicate this way, so much that I didn't think to question it. The scene Olga was referring to was a particular day when I was 11 when my mom took me on her errand running. One of her errands was an appointment with an energy healer in Scottsdale. The kind older woman told my mom that she could see that I was going to have a thyroid disease, and told my mom that it was important and urgent, actually, that she took me to an endocrinologist as soon as possible, because if they caught it early, they could help me. My mom never took me. And 11 years later, I was diagnosed with one of the worst cases of Hashimoto's disease recorded in Navy medical history. Seeing this, I felt the pain of that neglect and began to cry in front of Olga. Your thyroid gland will be healed, she sang. What your mom did was not okay. And she sang in her language with such empathy, I sobbed from feeling held in such compassion. I might have been able to chalk all of that up to being under the influence of ayahuasca if the mystical experiences had stopped there, but that was actually just the beginning. When I got back to Austin, I began hearing the songs that they sing down in the Amazon being whistled in my bedroom out loud as I awoke every morning. You have it right, outside of my head. I also began having what I call teaching dreams on a weekly basis. These dreams continue today, a year and 9 months later. And the same presence that teaches me in my dreams about universal love and compassion also began communicating with me in broad daylight. For example, it became not unusual for this presence and I to have an ongoing dialogue. Early on, it began showing me meditation techniques. Do you want to know how to feel at peace? It would say, excuse me, in a calm tone. When I was stressed out, yes, I would reply. And it would say something like, place your awareness at your feet and feel the floor underneath you. And my breath would slow. And in my biggest moments of sadness, it would send me a song that I hadn't heard in decades to let me know that it's still there and I'm not alone. Last night is actually a good example of this. I was feeling alone and discouraged at my mission, and I asked Spirit to help me feel encouraged so that I will have the strength and focus to do what I want to do in this life, which is to help others through my voice. Far from the depths of my subconscious arose the melody and lyrics of a song from Mariah Carey. Call on me, I will be there. Don't be afraid. Please believe me when I say you can count on me. Over the past 20 months, I've also been blessed with having some access to Spirit for my most existential questions about the universe. We have had many, many conversations about existence, but I'll save those for another story. While I found these experiences awe-inspiring, there's also a dark and heavy side to my journey. 7 months into it, I began having horrible night terrors and stopped sleeping. The nightmares were about Austin being bombed by terrorists and everything turned to dust. I believed the nightmares because I had had precognition before, and those events actually came true. I went into a state of panic for the children in schools downtown and decided to report the precognition to the police and FBI, knowing that people would think I was crazy, but knowing that I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if it came true, and I didn't report it. The night terrors continued for 9 weeks, and I spiraled. Heartbreakingly, my brother, who I'm very close to, was already beginning to distance from me because he said he couldn't listen to my mystical experiences. He's an atheist. This pulling away led me feeling even more alone and isolated in my journey without the support network from my family. I hit a crisis state. Understandably, I looked like I was in psychosis, which I know is scary for people to witness, But deep down in my heart, I knew that I wasn't crazy. But my mind was pushed to the limits of sanity, and I completely broke. I won't share the details here tonight, but with no one around me who understood what was going on, my mind broke into 1,000 pieces, and I entered into a setback phase that lasted for 5 solid months. I had very few resources that could provide any insight into what was happening to me, other than Terence McKenna's work on shamanism, the Hearing Voices movement in Europe in the 1980s, Carl Jung's Red Book, which shares his destabilizing mystical experiences from his breakdown over a 3-year period, and books about the Shipibo-Kanibo tribe in the Amazon and their cosmology. These 5 months were like nothing I'd ever experienced before. I had been depressed, I'd had anxiety, I'd felt disconnected from life before, I'd even experienced PTSD from the military and felt suicidal a couple of times. But during those times, others could relate. This was a different type of experience. My mind became so fragmented, I couldn't trust myself or my thoughts or find any way to ground in reality. I began meditating during this time and have experienced many transcendent peak experiences in meditation. But in some ways, meditation was also ungrounding because I began seeing spirit in the space between all form. And I began living so much in the present moment, but from a heady place, that the world began to feel like a dream, including myself. I was pretty unreachable during these 3 months, and I developed a deep sense of compassion for the homeless and all who struggle with mental illness. Things slowly began to stabilize when in September of last year, 14 months after my first ceremony with ayahuasca, and at the urging of spirit in my dreams, I decided to go down to Peru to sit with ayahuasca again, feeling terrified, but wanting to have access to the shamans down there more than to actually drink the medicine. It was during that week in communication with this presence, which today I just call spirit, that I began to slowly integrate. I learned from the elder shaman that essentially I was going through an initiation. I started connecting the dots between what felt like tests that I had been put through and the pruebas, as they call them in Spanish. In South American Amazonian culture, these are part of the rite of passage that ayahuasqueros go through as they're becoming a shaman. These pruebas help the initiate learn how not to identify with their minds, and much like the purification process of the ascetics in the Himalayas, initiates have the support from their friends, family, and community during this rite of passage. Here in the West, though, we have nothing of the sort. I learned from those conversations, as well as reading a book called Singing to the Plants, that the visions I had been having, the teaching dreams, and the clairaudience and telepathy I'd been experiencing were all part of a spiritual awakening brought on by this initiation. In Shipibo culture, they would say that the plant chose you. Although I don't consider myself a shaman, I began to see correlations between this culture's traditions for strengthening one's heart and testing one's mind, and my experiences. At least there was a model for this somewhere, I thought. I also began studying the esoteric interpretations of Hindu, Buddhist, Kabbalah, Sufi, and Christian texts, comparing them to a Western model of mental health. I could see how, in our culture, our fear of the paranormal can sadly turn someone's connection to the divine into fear of one's own self. And then we label their behavior as psychotic. I'm not the first to realize this. The book, The Myth of Mental Illness, published in 1961, is a landmark critique of how Western society's view of mental illness breeds mental illness. Gabor Mate's work echoes this message. I found that Buddhists take a more direct path to understanding the mind. Through disciplined practice, they develop an ability to focus their minds in contemplation for long periods of time, so that they can become the witness or conscious awareness of their thoughts and emotions. And I became very interested in developing a strong mind, the idea of enlightenment, and came to understand that there is a direct path to enlightenment and an indirect path. I loved the learning aspect of my journey and began finding it both challenging and satisfying to try to explain these concepts to friends who are immersed in mainstream ideas about what enlightenment is. Today I feel like I have come through the hardest part of this journey, and what is most important to me in life now is being a calm, loving presence for those who are suffering most from mental illness. It is with this heart desire that I will be starting a YouTube channel this summer, which I'm really excited about. If you'd like to support my cause and you can connect with me on Facebook at Sunshine Grace, I'll let you know when I publish my channel. And if you find value in my videos, you can share them with others who may be going through a spiritual awakening and need help having faith in love restored. And with that, here are a few messages from Spirit that I hope will resonate with you. I asked Spirit one time, what is the point of suffering? And I heard, to make us more sincere. When I told Spirit that I couldn't handle any more tests, Spirit said, we create our own tests. When I asked Spirit what happens to the love between two people when they divorce, Spirit said, it touches everything in the universe forever. When I asked Spirit why Spirit allows wars, Spirit said, I never imagined that you all would do that. In regards to enlightenment, I'm glad you guys get that. Spirit said, the journey from enlightenment can be summarized as moving from the head to the heart. And another quote about enlightenment, enlightenment is the simultaneous undoing of everything that's come your way. Lastly, when I asked Spirit, what is going on here? Spirit showed me my heart outside of my chest. I have to use my hands. And 1-inch diameter PVC pipes coming from all angles out of my heart. Spirit showed me that the pipes could be unscrewed and rescrewed into another outlet. And Spirit said, reassembling. I said, oh, that's really cute, but what else? And so Spirit showed me a trash can like they had in 1982 made of aluminum. And the trash can was taking trash out of me, and Spirit said, emptying out the trash. Thank you, everyone, for your precious listening ears. With your hearts, there would be no storytelling. Thanks.